Hey YouTube, how's it going? Kevin Cleary here with a knife video for you. Today we're going to take a look at the Massdrop Ferrum Forge Buck. I thought since deer season is just a few days away, this would be an appropriate review. And, you know, I put a link in the description box so that if you get skunked out there this year, you can at least go to Massdrop, buy one of these, and you'll still be able to tell all your friends that you did get a buck this year. I will say this, I tried to get this earlier than I ended up getting it. I thought I had signed up for the initial drop, but somehow, for some reason, I had not. And that actually turned out to be kind of a happy accident. I was able to go ahead and pick one of these up just a few days after the initial drop sort of started shipping to customers. They announced that they had these available, and as again, to my knowledge, they still do. But unlike the initial drop, you could now get them with these various milling patterns. So I got this one with, I think it's called the Mothership milling pattern. There's another milling pattern available. And then of course, just this plain slab-sided titanium, as well as a few different colors, blue, bronze, and I guess plain. There might be one other color I'm forgetting. You can correct me in the comments down below if that's the case. This is an interesting knife as well in that the design is not based on any currently existing, anyway, Ferrum Forge knife. So you can't go to, I can't point you to a particular Ferrum Forge model and say it's sort of based on that. In fact, the guys at Ferrum Forge say this is based on an Asian cavalry saber, which, I can sort of see the swordish shape here at the blade. And I will say, this is a blade that I like. So in a second, we'll talk about that. Before we get started getting into those specifics though, let's go and give you a size and weight. So overall, this knife is 7 13/16 inches long. The blade is 3 7/16. The handle is 4 3/8 when closed. It's a little under half an inch thick, and it weighs in at 3.58 ounces. So very lightweight, very comfortable to carry in pocket. Now, this is not a large knife, and I guess that's a bit of a, I actually don't mind the size of this knife. I find it quite comfortable in hand and very enjoyable to carry. Generally, I do like slightly larger knives, so if they, made this knife available in, say, an 8.5 inch size, I would be pretty excited. But let me say that this knife, even as it stands, is very, very nice. And I've been really, really enjoying this guy. So let's start off, as we always do, with this S35 VN satin finished cleaver style blade. We have a very high flat grind here with a really nice satin finish, almost a mirror polish satin, which I do really, really enjoy. Generally speaking, guys, I prefer satin blades just because I use my knives, and satin blades tend to hold up to use better than others. And if you do get a scratch or something on it, you can often buff it out, and that's not always an option with, say, a stonewash or especially with a DLC coated blade. So I've got to say, from a design standpoint and from just an overall, overall look of the knife, I just like satin blades a fair bit more. This one has a few other things going for it. Of course, it's a pretty unique sort of shape there. As I said, inspired by a cavalry saber, not a, I don't know what other element from the cavalry this would be inspired by, but anyway, inspired by sort of a sword there. You can see that. Has that cleaverish look, has this nice full belly all the way along. Really, really high flat grind. It's 156 thousandths stock. It's only 18 thousandths behind the edge. So very, very thin, very slicey blade. The only downside maybe to that would be the fact that it is quite thin out here at the tip. So this is not what I would call sort of a tactical or hard use knife in any sense. It's just a really nice, interesting designed EDC style blade. And for that purpose, I would say this works really, really well. My overall sort of description of this blade would be highly functional with a really cool form. Okay, so this is a nice marriage of function and form. You got a cool looking, different design that doesn't ask you to sacrifice really anything that you want a blade to do in terms of it being a great cutting tool, because it really, really is. Of course, S35 VN is great steel. So in addition to, having great grind, great design, you've also got a steel that's going to hold an edge really nicely and be quite highly corrosion resistant. So that's my take on the blade. I'm quite pleased with it. And that's something I was, sometimes when you get a blade that is, fairly design heavy, right? This is a blade that has a really strong look to it. Sometimes the designer will sacrifice function to get their particular shape and grind that they're going for. This one does not sacrifice function in any sense. It works fantastic as just an everyday cutting tool. So that's really, really nice. In terms of lockup and deployment on this guy, it is a titanium frame lock made by WE Knives on ceramic bearings. I will throw a picture in right now so you can take a look at the internals of this. And now let me say, the one thing that stands out, like the discussion we had about the Ferrum Forge Crux, is they've got nice thick bearing races in here, which really add to the longevity of the knife. In addition, having taken this knife apart and put it together a couple of times, I have to say that the overall sort of fit and quality and performance in terms of how they've done everything here is really, really nice. So we've got, as expected, a lock bar insert there, ceramic detent ball, ceramic bearings. You can see the stop pin is right there and does conceal nicely under that blade. And so, I like the way they've done lockup and deployment here. I like it's very smooth. It's easy to actuate the lock bar. It flips well. And the other nice thing about this is because of that, the milled hole here in the blade, you can spider flick this quite nicely. Now, it doesn't work as well, at least it doesn't work as well for me as a thumb opening hole. In fact, it doesn't work at all. But I really, I don't usually open my knives that way. And I don't see a real need for it when it spidey flicks as nice as it does, and of course has the flipper tab. So that's my overall take on lockup and deployment. Nice snappy detent, comfortable in every area. The little bit of jimping, the one thing I will say is oftentimes on turned down flipper tabs like this, you can slip off, but the jimping here is really, really nicely done. So you don't have that issue at all. Let's talk about the handle now. Now, of course, I already mentioned that there are a number of variations available. So this, of course, is the blue with the mothership milling. We've got this nice geared backspacer here, integrated lanyard hole, single position milled titanium clip. I should have mentioned this when we talked about the action, the lockup and deployment, but since we're talking about construction, it's probably more appropriate. I really like the way, and this is something Ferrum Forge does and something WE has done on the Ferrum Forge collabs. I don't know about all of them, but certainly the two that I've been able to check out. This relief cut is actually deeper than what you can see here from the front. So this is actually a little wall and it goes in, and so it ends up creating a really, really sort of, not only is it a nicely functioning relief cut, but it reinforces the strength of that lock a little bit, which is nice to see. If you ever watched any of those cold steel destruction videos, there were examples of titanium frame locks failing right at the relief cut, which, makes perfect sense. And so adding a little bit of strength to that is definitely something I appreciate. We do have no milling internally. Okay, and that's something that, you could have made this knife a few ounces lighter. You could have also made it a little bit lighter by going with something other than a full backspacer or a backspacer of this size, which is fairly substantial. That said, 3.5 ounces is really not a problem, so I can't complain too much, but it would have been kind of cool to see this come out just a little bit lighter, especially given its size, and it would be, sort of one more thing to appreciate. That said, it probably would add to the price point, which, since we're talking about construction and materials, it makes sense to point out this knife is quite affordable. I think they're like $125 for, S35VN, titanium frame lock, ceramic bearings. I mean, it's just a really, really well done knife. And you're getting all of that stuff we normally want to see on, $200 to $300 titanium frame locks for like $125, which is pretty stinking attractive. At least as far as I'm concerned. I know there's probably guys watching this who never spend more than $50 on a knife. And if that's you, then you probably won't want this. But even if, you are sort of value minded and you're looking for a great performing titanium frame lock that gives you a lot of what you're looking for out of something higher end like a ZT or, something from Riyadh or something like that, you're going to get it on this for a very, very reasonable price point. So I've got to give a lot of credit for that. Now, I kind of got distracted there. I didn't really get to talk about ergonomics much. Now, this is a smaller handle than I generally like, but it feels pretty good in hand. The jimping is very, very nice and really, really perfectly executed. It grabs your finger, but it doesn't become uncomfortable. I've got to say, I really, really like that. The other thing I love is when you choke up on this knife, you've got all of this area that you can get your thumb up here to do sort of some fine detailed work. And that I think is a great, great finish, or a great, great choice for, giving, it just fits so well in that choked up position that, as you can hear, I'm having a hard time finding the words to describe it exactly. So yeah, ergonomically, I think this knife is very, very nice. It's just a little smaller than I normally like. And so, is it as hand filling as, say, I don't know, a zero tolerance 0560? Well, no, it's not. But is it comfortable, and does it give me the confidence to feel like I could get some serious work done? Yes, it absolutely does. Now, I will add that the milling here is giving me a little more traction. So my comments may not be perfectly applicable to the plain slab-sided titanium, although it does have the bead blasted finish, which again adds quite a bit of grip. And we talked about that with the Crux, and we talked about it with various Chris Reeve knives as well. Finally, now that we've talked about pretty much all the important things that in terms of features and details, we should make a point to talk about some comparisons. Now, I don't have a lot of knives that compare well to this one. Obviously, the most standout in my collection is going to be the Crux. And let me say this. For the average knife user who's just saying, hey, Kevin, I want a knife that is just sort of, plain Jane, can be in my pocket all the time, the Crux is a great option. Okay, the Buck is a little bit different. The Buck is going to be geared towards someone who likes some added flair to their EDC. Okay, you've got this cleaver style blade, you've got some milling here. It's a different style of knife. Okay. Both are highly functional, and I can absolutely highly recommend both, but there's certainly a difference here. There's just a little more flair, a little more design involved in the Buck than there is in the Crux. So, sorry guys, excuse me. So that's how I would compare these two. Now, there are some other knives that I think would compare well to this. The ones that come to mind on my short list would be the Kaiser T1 and the Kaiser Corto. Both are great knives. I want to say the Corto can be a little tough to find because it's been discontinued, but if you check my Amazon store, and I'll try to remember to put a link to it in the description box, but if you check my Amazon store, I think there's some Kaiser Cortos available there. And I think you can still find them on eBay. White Mountain Knives may have some in stock. Remember the White Mountain Knives discount code, Sharp Stuff, and then, I kind of get credit for being the one who directed you over there. So those are some obvious comparisons. Even the Kaiser, why can't I think of the name right now? The Laconico, the Lancer. There we go. The Kaiser Lancer would be another similar knife where there's a lot of style and it's a really visually interesting knife, somewhat like the Buck here. Let's move this out of the way. I guess I should have put a Kaiser in frame for that discussion. This is not a comparable knife by any means. This is the Milner. But, I did want to bring this in to point out that, most Kaisers out there, unless you're getting the older ones that come up for a pretty deep discount, like the Corto that I've been talking about, or the Lancer, you're paying quite a bit more for something from Kaiser that is not really going to have any more features or function any better. All right. The other knife that I thought I'd bring in, since since people are very familiar with it, is the Para 2. And I do want to point out the fact that the blade length on these two is very, very close. The Para has a little more cutting edge, but not a whole lot. The main reason for bringing this in, though, is that everyone knows about the Para 2. Everyone's pretty familiar with the size, and it gives you a good sense for how this knife kind of compares to other knives out there and how it may fit your hand, okay? So, those are the comparisons I've got for you. Obviously, there are a few that I made that I don't have actually available here, but go ahead and look those up, and maybe, you're familiar with them as well. I think I have reviews on all of the knives I mentioned. Overall, guys, what do I think of this knife? I kind of love it. Okay, I like the design. It's got a great price point. It's really cool and it's interesting and it's different. I love the fact that it's available with a few different milling patterns and in a few different colors, so you can kind of personalize it to yourself. And of course, if you are out in the bush hunting this week or next week, I wish you all the luck in the world. But if something happens that you're not able to shoot a buck, at least you can sort of have this as a constellation prize. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will talk to you soon.